Now, interesting, Home Depot is next. If I go back, we can see that more has come over to the inbox while we've been working away. And so the next one in line was that Home Depot one. Interesting, you can see that there's 2 Home Depots within a day of each other for the same amount, but look at the difference. This one is a positive 45.18. So this one is a purchase with the debit card. And going back and taking a look at this one is actually a refund onto the debit card. So it's interesting that this refund came up before the actual purchase did, and that is because these are not in date order. They're usually actually in order in the order that they were uploaded. We did all at once, so it's a bit chaotic. But we can actually just sort by date right here from oldest to newest. And now you'll see things more in a historical order, as long as Dext didn't read the date in a backwards manner. So that's also something to be aware of. I know that some people come to Dext, sort by date, go to the end of the period, but don't look any further. And you can be risking missing things that are dated May 4th when really it's April 5th and you've just gone to the end of April and you haven't gone and looked any further. So I tend to say when working through Dext, at least take a look at the ones past the period that you might be working on, just to make sure that the dates are right and you're not missing something. So I thought, well, now that we're doing them in date order, that'll be the same order as the folder. So if anybody's watching this and following along in the order of the folder, let's do them in date order moving forward. And then I jumped over to processing to sort of push over the ones that are taking a while, and they actually did get pushed over right as I did that. So you can see that the new one that came over was this Sarah Terrell one on June 30th. So I'm just going to head and put it in oldest to newest date order again. And we'll start with this Staples one. So the Staples one says March. Now that's interesting that we're getting a March one in the 5th week of June. But it happens. And when that happens, what you want to do is you want to see, have I entered this already? So let's take a look how it was paid. $76.50. Now we recognize $76.50 from our last 4 reference list as the business owner's personal credit card. And because it's their personal credit card, we don't reconcile their personal credit card. We may or may not have entered this already. So what we want to do is we want to jump over to QBO and just make sure that we haven't already entered it, because we don't reconcile the $76.50. So let's see if we've got a 2204 Staples over there. So I'm going to go 2204, and we don't have a 2204 Staples receipt in here. Remembering this only goes back 12 months, so if it's an older receipt, you might have to do the advanced transaction search, or we can go to expenses, suppliers, and look at the Staples history. But we have not entered in this Staples receipt before. We are now putting in a March receipt, even though we have filed the HST for March. We can do this. First of all, the period isn't locked. So if this is a receipt that's from a locked year where the taxes have already been prepared and filed, the income taxes for the year have already been prepared and filed, we would have to put this in dated actually the first day of the unlocked year, the current year that we're currently in. But this is within the year, like we haven't filed our income taxes, like this isn't dated 2024 for a tax year that's already filed. This is within the current year, so we can add this to QBO. But March is a quarter in which we filed the HST. And this is where QuickBooks really shines. It tracks the carry forward ITCs that were entered after the period has been filed. This is why I have this in here, because when we file the HST, I get to show you what those carry forwards look like. They're called exceptions. So let's go ahead and put this in. March 23rd, it's read correctly. Staples, it's read. Office expenses, it guessed. I'm happy with that too. We don't need to add any of this information here. Look at that. It's read the amount. It's read the HST. The only thing that we have to do right now is add a new payment method. So new $76.50, Dext is telling us, hey, I've found a new one and I don't know what to do with it. So we can go ahead and link this 7650 to owner's CC or bank, like this, link. And also, when I use that bank account, owner's CC or bank, I like to say the card number up here in the document reference number. That's just like a receipt number. We don't need to track that. I do like to put the bill number in if there's a bill number, but this is just a receipt. So I'll just say MC7650 right here in the document reference number, just so that when we look at those transactions paid by the owner, CC, or bank, you can see which method they used to pay it. I found that to be helpful in different scenarios. Not very often, but when it's there, it's nice. So now we've got everything lined up. It still says new. We can jump over to business settings and change the name of the payment method to owner's credit card 7650. But we don't have to do that right now. We can just go ahead and hit publish. Though I would say if you want to keep your Dext nice and tidy, you are going to want to change that new. So we'll go to lists, payment methods, and there is that 7650 new. So we'll just call that owner's CC. Otherwise, I'll always say new. And then we can just go back to our costs inbox and see what is next. I'm going to put it in date order again. And we can see that the next one right here is an email. Let's see what it says. So what this is an email string between Sarah and the vendor Signs and Wonders Printing. And we can see that Sarah sent Signs and Wonders, hey, I think you overcharged us. And then can you please refund the $468.95? So in some cases, the $468.95 overpayment stays as a credit on the account and is applied to future invoices. And sometimes it's refunded back. So right now we get to see how to do that. Scrolling down, we can see that Signs and Wonders Printing says, yep, no worries, I will refund your credit card the $468.95 today. So this is going to be refunded to the credit card. So we'll be putting this in as a credit card credit. We have used credit card credit in the past with this case study. So for example, when she went back to Canadian Tire, I think it was, and got a refund. So usually a credit card credit, you just post to whatever the category is that you're refunding, right? Just like a credit memo or whatever. But this is a different thing. This is a refund of an overpayment. So if this was refunded by an e-transfer, it would be a bank deposit. And since it's refunded to the credit card, like the overpayment is given back to us through the credit card, it's going to be a credit card credit. But because it is giving us back overpaid funds as opposed to an item being returned, we don't use an expense account. Let me show you what it looks like. It's easier to do than explain. So you can see that it's already figured out that it's a credit note refund. That is awesome. I just love Dext. It thinks the supplier is Sarah Travell. And it's very important that we change this actually to Signs and Wonders Printing, because that is who is giving the refund of overpayment. Right? So that needs to say Signs and Wonders Printing. And it's got the document reference number 7551. That's just to do with an invoice that was overpaid. But the category, like I said, this is not her going back and getting a refund from Signs and Wonders Printing, like returning items and reducing expense. Because, and this is very important, because we have this currently in QBO as an overpayment on account. So I'll go to Signs and Wonders Printing, just to remind you that right now we don't have like a full charge of that $672 that we're looking to reduce the expense for. What we currently have this in for is an credit sitting on the account, an payment higher than what the bill is for. And it's because of this, that's what makes this unique, that we're actually going to put this one to accounts payable because it is returning money that was overpaid and not applied to a bill. And that is why it's so important that we say that the supplier is Signs and Wonders Printing. Whenever you have accounts payable, you've got to make sure that the supplier is the correct supplier. And then coming down further, you can see that Dext knows that it's a negative 468. There's no HST. And we're going to say that this actually is being refunded to the MasterCard, but Dext doesn't like that we're going to post it to cash. Because if you remember, the cash published to and also the credit card published to, those are like expense entry screens. And this is not an expense, right? This is a credit card credit. So I'm going to come up and show you that because this type says credit note refund, that is why Dext is like, hold on, if this is a credit card refund, you can't put it in as an expense. So it will be happy once we say credit card credit. Now it's happy. Now we can publish it. And let's go over to QBO and go look at the vendor history for Signs and Wonders Printing. And now you can see that the credit card credit is showing up here. And this is what it would look like if we were to enter it the big screen way, not using Dext. So putting it in the big screen way, we would have it as a credit card credit, and we're posting it, as you can see, to accounts payable. That's weird, right? It's the refund of an overpayment. And because we've put this to accounts payable, when we go to this original overpayment transaction, now we can see that it is something that we can click off and there's no longer a credit on account. This 672 is paying for this bill, and also I am now pairing it with the refund that came to our credit card. So by doing it this way, by posting it to accounts payable, it is showing up here. That's the accounts payable line for us to close out this overpayment. So to reiterate, because this is refunding us money that we paid that wasn't applied to a bill, by entering that credit card credit to accounts payable, we've now have it as an option to check off here and to close out this payment, so it no longer shows an overpayment on the account. Everything's closed and happy. And that would also work if it came back via an e-transfer. But instead of doing a credit card credit, we would do a bank deposit. And in this section, we'd say, you'd have to say received from Signs and Wonders Printing. And the account would be accounts payable. That's how you get it to show up as something to click off within the payment. You'd say the amount, and of course, the sales tax is out of scope, like that. Now, because we entered that from Dext, though, the nice thing is, for this credit card credit, now we've got the email history in there about why and what we got this money back for. So another reason that I love using digital document management software to sync information into the bookkeeping file. One change I think that I would make to this, though, is I wouldn't call it reference number 7551. I would call this return of OVP, save and close. So let's go back to Dext. Next up, we have an e-transfer from Sarah. Sarah is e-transferring from the Canada Bank over to her CIBT line of credit. So it's not telling us whether this is Canada Bank checking or Canada Bank savings. So we should jump over to QuickBooks and just have a quick look to see. So 500, I'm in Canada Bank checking here. Let's do a search. And we can see that there are two. There is an e-transfer sent on July 2nd. And then if we go over to the CIBT line of credit, we can see the e-transfer coming in. Well, it's interesting that QuickBooks is not offering this up as a suggested pair like it is for this transfer to the savings account. And I think this might be because it's got the bank description e-transfer. That could be the case. Now, if we were entering this from the bank feed, we absolutely could just make this a transfer. We could say this is not an expense, but this is a transfer, and it's going directly to, not accounts payable, but to CIBT, like that, line of credit. And so this is a transfer, we would post it, and then we could go over to the CIBT line of credit and marry the transfer that we've just created to the second bank feed info line. But since we're working in Dext right now, you'll note that if we go down to this publish to, the transfer isn't an option. So another way to do a transfer is to do an expense entry that hits up both the bank that it's coming out of, and then the category in the tummy is going to be the account that it's going into. So I'll show you what that looks like. So the date is July 2nd, and we can say that this is a payment to CIBT, like that. That's a vendor name. And the category is CIBT, CIBT line of credit. And we can scroll down, and we can see it's $500 with no tax. Excellent. And it's being paid out, we confirmed, out of the business bank account. So we have a couple of options here. I know that the debit card for the business bank is 5642, so I could just use that one and set it up. Or we can go ahead and create one that's just called like the Canada Bank Checking. So I'm going to do that one. I'm going to add a payment method, and it is Canada Bank Checking, like that. And the bank account is Canada Bank Checking, and we can click add. So now I've created a payment account just called Canada Bank Checking that's connected to Canada Bank Checking, and we can go ahead and hit publish. And I'll show you what that looks like in QBO. We're going to wait for it to say it's queued, so we got to wait for a moment. Now it's published. We can come on over, look at the most recently added item. There's the CIBT payment. And this is the expense that we just put in. So basically, out of Canada Bank Checking, we're paying CIBT, and the $500 is going to CIBT line of credit. And there is the PDF attachment. So it's kind of like a transfer, but it's a different way to put it in such a way that we can put it in using Dext and have the attachment there for reference. Okay, so let's go back to Dext and see what is next. Next, we have a Home Depot purchase. It's for a Vigoro wand. And if we went to the Home Depot website and we looked up that number, we would see that it's actually like a nozzle to put the end of a water hose. So the nozzle that you spray the water out of, but it's a wand. It's like a stick, so you can go high with it. And so I would put that under supplies. And interestingly, even though the date is backwards, it's got the date correct. So I wonder if it kind of knows that Home Depot is reversed. I don't know. Dext has some like smarts that I like. Did it do that on purpose? I don't know, but that's great. Now it's got a document reference number. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this to show you what the document reference number shows when you don't put one in, because there's not really, like we don't need to follow these receipt numbers. It's guessed supplies, so that was nice. It just sort of guessed, but it's correct, so we'll let it keep on guessing. And you can see it's figured out that the total is this, the extracted amount is that. So new 5642. It does not know that 5642 is the Canada Bank Checking debit card. Now we have our last four cheat sheet. That's how come we know that is the debit card. But if you didn't have that, you could go over to QBO, double check on the Canada Bank bank feed to see if 4518 shows up, and it does. So what we do next is we can either drop this down and choose that Canada Bank Checking that we just created, but that Canada Bank Checking one doesn't have the last four for our reference. So let's go ahead and link this new one. So link to a bank account, link this one to Canada Bank Checking and hit link. And again, it still says new. I wish, so this is my call out to Dext, that we could sort of change it on the fly in that spot, because we'll either have to just put up with the fact that it says new from now on, or take a moment, jump over to business settings, go to the lists, which are right here, go to the payment methods, and here's where we can take that new and just say, debit 5642. Debit CB, like Canada Bank. Something different than new at any rate. So let's go back and let's put it in date order again and go back to that Home Depot receipt we were just in. And we can come on down and there's the new name, Debit Canada Bank 5642. And everything's lined up for us. We can go ahead and hit publish. Next, what we have here is, look at this, the next day, so July 4th, maybe it didn't work, they didn't like it, who knows, but for whatever reason, they have now returned this Vigoro wand. So now we have to put in a debit card refund in using Dext. Now it knows that it's a refund and it definitely doesn't want us to use the cash, but I can only say credit card credit. I can't say debit card credit because look, you can say credit card credit, but credit card credit entry doesn't let you use the payment method bank. So this is a problem with QBO that we all want them to fix. Let us put in a debit card credit, please, QBO. But in the meantime, how do we put this in using Dext? Now we have done debit card credits earlier on in the case study, and you could see that there was a quick way of putting it in and a more complicated multi-step way to put it in. The quick way is just to make it a bank deposit that hits up supplies and HST on purchases. But we also can't do a bank deposit here. So because there's no deposit option here, what are our options? Well, one option is to go to the QBO account. Then what we can do is we could do it the shortcut way that we had talked about before, which is to just enter it right from the bank feed. So we would be entering a deposit, would say that this was supplies, and we would say that that is HST on purchases, and that's of course important. And also make sure that the supplier said Home Depot. So that would be one way of doing it. Once you've posted that, then you can come back to Dext. You can hit download right here and look, it pops it right into our downloads. And then you can just, when you're in QBO, drag this over as an attachment to attach. So that's one option. But you can actually use Dext to put in a debit card refund the long way that I showed you at the beginning of the case study. Let me show you what I mean. So what we're going to do is it still says credit note refund. It says Home Depot. And instead of us saying publish to credit card credit, we're going to say publish to credit note. So now this is going to be a supplier credit that's in the system. And it's going to be a supplier credit to Home Depot. So let me go ahead and hit publish. From there, we're going to go over to QBO and we're going to add a new bank deposit. We can do it the shortcut way actually. So this is a deposit to accounts payable. So now, because remember, it's almost like a refund for a credit memo sitting in our supplier Home Depot. So very much like that overpayment return that we just got back from Signs and Wonders Printing, by entering this to accounts payable, we're going to see it as an option in the Home Depot vendor transactions. Let's keep going. More than accounts payable, there's no HST on this. We've already put the HST in as part of that transaction that we put in as a supplier credit through Dext. So this is at a scope. And it is important to say Home Depot, right? We want to see it in the Home Depot accounts payable interface or vendor or supplier subledger. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit post. And then let's go over to the supplier, Home Depot, and I'll just type that in here. There it is. And here we can see that deposit that we just put in. Now we did that the shortcut way. Let me show you what that looks like if we were to do it with the big screen. So here's the big screen way. So receive from Home Depot, accounts payable at a scope for HST. And we'll close that. And because we set accounts payable in that tummy, that's why we can see it now in the transaction list as a credit to apply to this credit memo. And here's that supplier credit. So if I were to open that up, you can see that it's supplies, HST. There's the receipt. Remember, we synced it over from Dext. So all we have left to do now is to apply the refund to the credit. All right. And let's expand this over. So we just see how there's an open balance on these two items. We need to mush them together. So we need to get to the bill payment screen. The way that we get, one of the ways we can get to the bill payment screen is by doing an expense entry and turning it into a bill payment. Simply by putting the name of a vendor who has open bills and credits. So we'll say Home Depot. And out pops both of these deposits and the supplier credit. So we're going to add all and see how that's turned now into a bill payment. And now you can see here's the deposit. That's the $45.15 that we just added. And here's the supplier credit that we added right from Dext. And we're going to use the July 4th date, not today's date. So let's go back to July 4th, make sure it's all on the same date there. And I'm not going to say that it was paid out of the triangle. In fact, because the amount is 0, I don't have to say any account at all. And now I can go save and close. So that is the steps for adding a debit card refund from Dext with the attachment in the entry that you've put in. It's a little convoluted, but when we don't use the supplier credit and the deposit way, sometimes you don't actually see that refund in the list of transactions for Home Depot. Something else to mention is take a look at that RB number. So that RB number is there. Remember when we entered this Home Depot expense, we deleted the document number? If we sync something from Dext without putting a document number in, the number defaults to its identification number in Dext. And the identification number in Dext starts with RB. And that is because Dext changed its name. It used to be Receipt Bank. So RB stands for Receipt Bank, which is the old name of Dext. All that to say is if you see something with an RB number, that's a hint or a clue that that was a transaction that was put in by Dext. So going back to Dext, that was actually the last charge for June, week number 5. And so we can move on now to week number 5 bills. And we're going to go ahead and upload these bills into Dext as well.